The forbidden door. The air was thick with summer heat as 12-year-old Noah Carter wiped the sweat from his brow, eyes squinting under the blazing Nebraska sun. His shirt clung to his back, soaked through, but he didn't care. All that mattered now was getting the ball past the makeshift goalie post, an old milk can wedged between two fence posts behind our weathered farmhouse. Noah lined up his shot, dirt-streaked sneakers digging into the dry earth. He took 3 precise steps, raised his leg and, wham! The ball soared, not toward the goal, but up, high, way too high, sailing through the air like it had a mind of its own. Noah's heart plummeted as the ball arced right over the rusted roof of the old barn, the one place on the farm his father had strictly forbidden him to enter. Crash! The unmistakable sound of shattering glass echoed across the quiet countryside. Noah froze. His stomach flipped. The barn, the one with the big red X spray-painted on the front after the fire last year. The one padlocked tight and always off-limits. His dad, George Carter, didn't even let the farmhands go near it anymore. Said it was dangerous, full of broken equipment and unstable beams. Said anyone caught inside would wish they hadn't been born. Noah looked toward the road. No truck. His dad must still be in town picking up parts for the tractor. That gave him, at best, 15 minutes. He didn't have a choice. That ball meant everything to him. It was a birthday gift from his older brother, who'd joined the army last year. A connection to someone who actually believed in him. If he left it in there, he'd never see it again, and he'd have to explain to his dad how it got there. He couldn't risk that. As Noah approached the barn, an eerie chill ran down his spine, despite the heat. The air around the structure felt different. Still, heavy. The once bright red paint had faded to a dull, peeling rust, and the fire-scarred wood gave it the look of something abandoned by time itself. The padlock on the side door hung loose. Noah frowned. His dad always locked it. Always. Did he forget this morning? Or had someone else been inside? His hand hovered over the handle. His fingers trembled. "You just go in, grab the ball, and leave," he whispered to himself. That's it. He pulled the door. The hinges groaned like something alive. Dust danced in the sunlight filtering through the broken windows. The air smelled of smoke, old wood, and something else. Something sour. Noah stepped inside. His sneakers crunched against the dry straw littering the floor. Long shadows stretched across the interior. Broken tools and scorched machinery lay scattered beneath weather-stained tarps. In the far corner, he saw it, his ball, nestled beside an overturned feed bin. He exhaled in relief and stepped forward. But then, he heard it. A noise, a soft rustle. Then, a muffled cough. Noah froze. Goosebumps prickled his arms. He turned toward the source of the sound, toward the stacked hay bales near the far stall. Something moved behind them. Someone. Noah's breath caught in his throat. With cautious steps, he approached, heart pounding in his chest like a war drum. He moved around the bales slowly, and then stopped dead in his tracks. In the dim light sat a small figure, curled up on a tattered blanket, knees pulled to her chest. A girl, maybe 7 or 8, with tangled dark hair, dirty skin, and wide, terrified eyes that locked onto his the moment she noticed him. Neither of them spoke. The silence was deafening. Noah raised both hands. I'm not gonna hurt you," he whispered, voice trembling. "I just came for my soccer ball." The girl didn't answer. She looked, scared to death. Behind her was a small pile of things, an empty water bottle, some stale bread wrapped in napkins, and an old lantern. It wasn't just a hiding place. It was a living space. "Who are you?" Noah asked. Still no answer. The girl shrank back, eyes darting toward the barn door. She looked like she wanted to run, but something held her back. And then Noah heard it. Gravel crunching. tires rolling up the driveway. He peeked through the crack in the wall. His father's truck, pulling in earlier than expected. Panic surged through his chest. He turned back to the girl. "You have to hide," he whispered urgently. "He can't find you in here." Her eyes widened even more at the sound of his father's truck doors slamming. She scrambled behind a feed bin, disappearing like a ghost. Noah sprinted toward the barn door, yanked it shut, and ran around the back, just in time to see his dad walking toward the house with a sack of supplies. He tried to act normal, tried to breathe, tried not to think about what he'd just seen. But his thoughts were spinning. Who was that girl? Why was she in their barn? And why was she so afraid of his father? The secrets we bury. Noah couldn't sleep. Not after what he'd seen. Even as the soft chirping of crickets filled the humid Nebraska night, even as the wind whistled through the window screen beside his bed, his mind stayed trapped inside the barn. The girl's eyes, wide, terrified, were burned into his thoughts. Who was she? Why was she hiding in a condemned barn with nothing but crusty bread and a blanket to her name? And most of all, why did she look so scared when she heard his father coming? Noah rolled onto his side and stared at the glowing numbers on his digital clock. 2:14 a.m. He hadn't heard a peep from downstairs since the lights went out hours ago. But the silence wasn't comforting. Not now. Not after what he'd seen. He sat up and looked out his window. The moon bathed the farm in silver light, throwing shadows long and deep across the yard. That's when he saw it. Movement. A figure walking across the yard, heading toward the barn. Slow, deliberate steps. His father. Noah's breath caught in his throat. He crouched by the window and peered out. His dad had something in his hand. A tray. A plate. From the way he stumbled slightly, Noah guessed he'd been drinking again. But he wasn't heading to the barn with tools or parts. He was bringing food. Noah's stomach turned. His father reached the barn, pulled a key from his pocket, and opened the padlock. The door creaked open, swallowing him in darkness. A minute passed. Then 2. Noah's heart thundered in his chest. He had to do something. He crept out of bed, threw on a hoodie, and tiptoed to his bedroom door. One deep breath, and he opened it slowly. The house was silent. His mother's door was shut. The floorboards groaned under his weight as he made his way down the stairs, wincing with every step. In the kitchen, the cordless phone sat in its cradle. Noah hesitated. Then he picked it up and dialed. 911. The line clicked, and a calm voice answered. 911. What's your emergency? Noah whispered. There's a girl in our barn. I think my dad's keeping her there. 20 minutes later, red and blue lights danced across the dark cornfield horizon. Deputy Riley Anders, a young but sharp-eyed officer, stepped out of his cruiser with a flashlight in hand. He met Noah on the front porch. "You're the one who called?" he asked gently. Noah nodded. "I saw my dad bring food to the barn. And there's a girl in there. I saw her yesterday when my soccer ball went inside by accident. She looked scared. She didn't talk." Riley narrowed his eyes and looked toward the barn. "Your dad home?" Noah nodded again. "He went out there like 10 minutes ago. He's still inside, I think." Riley tapped his radio. Unit 17 requesting backup for welfare check at Carter Farm. Possible juvenile in distress. One adult male on property. Approaching structure now. The deputy turned to Noah. "Stay here. Inside the house. Lock the door behind you." "Okay." Noah opened his mouth to protest but stopped. He nodded. "Okay." As the deputy approached the barn, Noah slipped inside and watched from the window, his heart climbing into his throat. The flashlight beam swept across the barn door. Deputy Anders knocked, firmly but not forcefully. "Mr. Carter, Millfield County Sheriff's Office. Please step out." No response. Another knock, this time louder. Then, movement. The door creaked open, and Noah's father stepped into the beam of the flashlight, squinting. "What the hell is this?" he growled. "It's the middle of the night." "Sir," Riley said calmly, "we received a call. There's a report that someone may be in distress on this property. I need to take a quick look inside the barn." "There's no one in there," George said quickly. "It's just old farm junk and some feed. You want to see my taxes too while you're at it." Riley didn't flinch. "I'm obligated to investigate, sir. Would you please step aside and let me enter?" Noah could see it. His father hesitated. He didn't argue. But the tension in his stance was enough to make Noah's blood run cold. Then, reluctantly, he stepped aside. Deputy Anders disappeared into the barn, light bouncing across the walls. Seconds passed, then more. Noah's legs felt weak. Then, "Jesus Christ," the deputy muttered. "Dispatch, I have visual confirmation. We need an ambulance. Now." The ambulance took less than 10 minutes to arrive, but to Noah, it felt like a lifetime. They brought the girl out on a stretcher. Pale, small, her hair tangled and face thin from what looked like months of poor nutrition. She didn't speak, just stared up at the moon with blank eyes. Noah's mom had been woken by the sirens. She stood barefoot on the porch, robe clutched tight around her, trembling. She said nothing, but Noah saw the truth in her eyes. She already knew. Inside the house, Deputy Anders sat across from Noah and his mother, recording statements while another officer led George Carter to the back of a patrol car in handcuffs. The sight of him being shoved into the vehicle was surreal. This man who had barked orders, slapped dinner plates off tables when angry, slammed doors so hard the windows rattled. Now he was quiet. Contained. Exposed. Noah answered the deputy's questions clearly, repeating every detail. How he saw the girl, how his father brought food, how she looked scared when she heard his voice. His mother sat silently beside him, staring at the floor. When Deputy Anders turned to her, she flinched. "Mrs. Carter," he said gently, "how long have you known the girl was in that barn?" Her lip quivered. "I didn't know. Not at first," she whispered, "but I suspected. I heard noises. My husband said it was raccoons. Then I found a dress. A child's dress in the laundry. It wasn't mine. It wasn't Noah's. I was afraid to ask." Noah turned to her, wide-eyed. You knew." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I didn't know what he'd do if I told. I thought if I kept quiet, he'd let her go eventually." The room fell silent. Deputy Anders spoke gently. "Ma'am, you and your son aren't in trouble, but we will need full cooperation moving forward." The girl identified herself as Madeline Rose. She's been missing for nearly a year. Noah blinked. "From the news? The posters at school. That's her." "Yes," Anders nodded grimly. "Your father took her and kept her in that barn. We found blankets, food wrappers, ropes. There was even surveillance equipment. This wasn't an accident. He planned this." Later that morning, the sun began to rise over the Carter farm. Crime scene tape fluttered in the breeze around the barn. Frank Carter was long gone, taken in for questioning. Noah and his mother sat together on the front steps, watching as detectives and forensics teams moved in and out of the barn. The house, once quiet with unspoken tension, now rang with the hum of justice at work. Noah looked at his mother. "What happens now?" She reached over and took his hand, eyes still red but face calmer than he'd seen in years. "Now, we start over." Noah nodded slowly. The truth was out. But the healing, that was just beginning. Truth on trial. The small town of Millfield hadn't seen this much attention in decades. News vans lined the rural road leading to the Carter farm. Reporters swarmed the outer gate with cameras and microphones, shouting questions no one wanted to answer. Neighbors stood at the fence line, whispering behind cupped hands, their eyes flicking toward the barn with crime scene tape still fluttering in the wind like a tattered flag. Inside the farmhouse, Noah sat at the kitchen table, shoulders hunched, hands wrapped around a chipped coffee mug filled with hot chocolate. He hadn't said much in days, not since his father was arrested, not since the ambulance took Madeleine away. His mother, Claire, sat across from him. She looked different now, lighter, like someone who'd spent years walking underwater and had finally come up for air. Her face was pale, but for the first time in Noah's memory, there were no shadows under her eyes, only a quiet sadness. The house was quiet, the silence broken only by the distant hum of helicopters and reporters outside. They both jumped when someone knocked on the door. Claire stood up slowly and opened it. On the porch stood a man and a woman. The woman had red-rimmed eyes and held a photograph in her trembling hand. The man's arm was wrapped protectively around her shoulders, and his face was ashen with fatigue. Behind them stood 2 sheriff's deputies and a child therapist from the hospital. "I'm Ann Rose," the woman said, voice catching. "This is my husband Durek. We're—" Claire's hand flew to her mouth. "You're her parents." Ann nodded, eyes brimming. "We heard what your son did. We needed to thank him. In person." Claire stepped aside, and the couple entered. Ann's eyes immediately landed on Noah, who was frozen in his chair. She knelt beside him. "You found her." Noah blinked. I didn't mean to. I kicked my ball into the barn." Ann smiled through tears. "You listened to your heart. You spoke up when no one else did. You saved her." Derek stepped forward, his voice deep but gentle. "They say she wouldn't have survived another month. Maybe less. Because of you, we have our daughter back." Claire sat beside Noah, placing a hand on his shoulder. He was scared, but he did it anyway. The child therapist, Miss Tara, stepped forward gently. "Madeleine's in recovery now. She's still weak, still afraid. But she remembers Noah." She asked about him. "She remembered me." Noah asked, his voice soft. "She said you were the only one who didn't scare her." Tara replied with a nod. "She'd like to see you, when you're ready." Later that day, the courthouse in Millfield was packed with people. State versus George Carter. The charges: kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, child endangerment, and assault. Noah and Claire were escorted through the back entrance to avoid the crowd. Inside the courtroom, the air was thick with tension. Reporters scribbled notes. Lawyers whispered urgently. But all Noah could hear was the sound of his own heartbeat as he took his seat behind the witness stand. When his name was called, he stood slowly. The courtroom seemed too big, too cold. His legs wobbled as he walked to the stand and sat. The prosecutor, a kind-eyed woman named Ms. Vega, approached. "Noah," she said gently, "can you tell us what happened the day you found Madeleine Rose?" Noah swallowed hard, then began. He told them about the ball, about the broken window, about seeing the girl behind the hay bales, and how terrified she looked when she heard his dad's truck. He described watching his father bring food to the barn late at night. He explained how he made the 911 call. As he spoke, the courtroom was silent. Even his father, sitting in the defendant's chair in a prison jumpsuit, said nothing. He just watched Noah with hollow, sunken eyes. When Ms. Vega asked, "Why did you make the call?" Noah replied with a voice much stronger than he expected. "Because no one else was going to help her. And I didn't want her to die in that barn." After Noah testified, it was Claire's turn. Her voice trembled, but she spoke clearly. She told the court about the years of control and silence, how George had isolated her, manipulated her, made her believe she was powerless. "I wasn't just afraid for me," she said. "I was afraid for Noah." She admitted to finding signs of Madeleine. The dress, the noise, the food. But every time she considered telling someone, George had a way of knowing and punishing. At one point during her testimony, she looked directly at George and said, "You didn't just cage that little girl. You caged us all." When the Roses took the stand, there wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. Anne described the day Madeline disappeared from the county fair. The years of searching, the nights of crying, the cold calls, the hopelessness. Then she looked at Noah. "You saved her. We'll never forget that." When the jury returned with the verdict, George Carter didn't blink. Guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Weeks passed. The farm was quiet again, but the silence felt different now. The barn was boarded up permanently, set to be demolished. The sheriff's department offered Claire and Noah temporary housing in town, and a local support fund was raised by neighbors who'd once looked the other way. People started showing up, to offer help, to apologize, to thank them. Noah returned to school and was greeted like a hero. Teachers hugged him. Students clapped. But he didn't feel like a hero. He just felt like a kid who did what had to be done. One Saturday morning, a silver SUV pulled into the gravel driveway. Noah and Claire stepped out to greet the visitors. It was the Roses. And Madeline. She looked better now. Healthier. Still small, still quiet. But the fear was no longer in her eyes. She held a stuffed rabbit in one hand and clutched her mother's fingers with the other. When she saw Noah, she smiled. It was small, but real. Anne knelt beside her. "You remember Noah, sweetheart?" Madeline nodded. Then, to everyone's surprise, she walked to him and whispered, "Thank you." Noah blinked. "I didn't do anything special." "Yes, you did," Anne said. "You saw her, really saw her. That was everything." Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the fields, Noah stood on the porch beside his mother. They watched as the barn was torn down by a county crew, its crumbling walls falling under the weight of the bulldozer's claw. "What now?" he asked quietly. Claire smiled gently. "Now we plant something new." Epilogue. Months later, a new structure stood where the barn once was, not a storage shed or equipment room, but a community center for children and families in need. It was built with donations from people across the state, organized by the Roses and volunteers. Above the entrance, a small plaque read, "In honor of courage that whispers louder than fear. Dedicated to Noah Carter and all who choose to speak the truth, no matter the cost." Inside, kids played, families gathered, and at the center of it all was a boy with a soccer ball, older now, stronger, and a little girl with tangled hair and a stuffed rabbit by her side. Two children once trapped by silence, now free to live, speak, and hope again.